Sophia, good evening. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to being on. And as far as I'm aware, you're first paranormal guest, so I'm pretty excited. Thank you for giving me that honor.
Yep, this is certainly a milestone episode because, yes, you are, in fact, the first paranormal investigator to come on the podcast. And, I feel like I should have gotten a paranormal investigator on here sooner because, like, we're going into spooky season right now. We're recording in like mid-September, and Halloween's my favorite holiday, and I've always been fascinated by the paranormal. So I'm not sure why it's taken me this long, but I'm glad we got you on here to, to kind of set this framework for the show.
Yeah, I'm happy to be on and answer all of your paranormal questions in time for spooky season. So, yeah, it's a busy time, definitely for the paranormal world. I'm trying to do some stuff coming up with some people in the field, and I'm just like, oh my God, how am I supposed to plan this with their schedules? So, yeah, spooky season is definitely a big one for the paranormal.
Yeah, yeah. So I was kind of like looking into some of the stuff that you've done and you're currently doing right now. As we're recording, you are currently 25 years old. So you're a young paranormal investigator. However, you are not a rookie paranormal investigator by any stretch. You've been doing this for quite some time. So I kind of want to go back to the beginning here a little bit. Can you kind of take us
Mhm.
back and just sort of tell us, what kind of set you down this path? Like, what kind of got you interested in pursuing the paranormal in the way you are now?
Yeah, so I am currently 25, and I have been doing this a really long time, 17 years actually. I started investigating when I was 8 years old, and for me, I think the paranormal has kind of been around and with me from before I can even remember. I did live in a haunted house, and we didn't realize it was haunted until I was about 9 years old, so about a year after we were in the field. But looking back, there was definitely some things prior to us even being in the field that kind of makes sense in hindsight. But the initial beginnings, my parents, they've always been eclectic. We always had like the creepy house with we loved Halloween, the haunted mansion and stuff like that. And so for their 10-year wedding anniversary, they decided they wanted to do something different. So they went to the Queen Mary's website and looked at ghost tours, and it was hosted by Peter James, who was the psychic off of a Fox show called Sightings back in the 90s, which is how they used to spend their date nights watching X-Files and Sightings. And they decided, okay, super romantic, let's go on a ghost tour. And I just for some reason got really jealous. I'm like, why can't I go? And they said, okay. So after they had went on the tour, Peter gave everyone his personal email and phone number. They sent Peter an email and said, hey, our 8-year-old daughter really wants to go on this tour. Is it safe for her to go? And he replied, there are over 500 ghosts on the ship. All of them are my friends. And for those who aren't familiar with the Queen Mary, there's actually a spirit of a ghost child in the pool area, well, the first class pool area. So I went on the tour and he was going to have me call out to the ghost named Jackie, who would have been around my age. And I fell in love with the paranormal. And here I am 17 years later, and I started my radio show a little bit after that, but not super long.
So you were 8 years old, and your first paranormal investigation was one of the most haunted places in the entire world. What a way to
Yes.
get started! Get started there, Sophia.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what happened to me as an adult. Like, I'm way more scared of stuff as an adult than I was as a child. Like, I don't know. I'm just trying to watch horror movies more now, but I'm not like a horror movie person. I love horror video games, but I was just like pretty fearless as a child. My parents said they would take me actually on the like fictional ghost tour. They have one of those too on the Queen Mary called the Ghosts and Legends tour, and they have like steam shoot up and everything. And they'd be carrying me around like 2 or 3 years old. And during all the jump scare points where everyone was scared, I would laugh. So I guess like I just had like a little demented quality as a child. And so yeah, I wasn't bothered by it. I had my first cognizant ghost experience at that point in time. And I don't know, it was just really fascinating to me. And Peter, being a psychic off of a TV show, he was sick at the time. He had uh not emphysema, he had like asthma and he was having lung problems. And so he had heard that my dad was an author and asked him to co-author and edit his biography and manuscript he had written. And so my dad agreed because obviously he loved Peter, and Peter passed away about a month after that final tour. So we really kind of did, even though I fell in love with the field, we got thrust into the paranormal based on the fact that my dad then went and co-authored this book for a psychic. And then we were going to paranormal events and doing stuff like that. So it wasn't just the Queen Mary. I mean, there was definitely an interest there, but you know, the paranormal kind of really chose us through a series of just, you know, really incredible events.
And you said that your childhood home, or at least one of your childhood
Mhm.
homes, was actually haunted. That you moved into like a year after you started your paranormal journey. So, when you
Yeah.
kind of first moved in, if can you remember like some of the things that you might have observed like inside the house that probably gave you and your family the impression that you all might be living in a haunted place now?
So I actually didn't move into it a year after the field. I had lived in it my whole life from like the day I was brought home from the hospital. And
Oh, okay.
actually my dad was raised in the home as a child. He was adopted, but his adoptive father was a paranoid schizophrenic. And so when he was about 9, he was actually removed from the home for his safety. And my grandfather became a ward of the LA County. And at that time, they didn't take good care of their wards. He died basically without heating, electricity in this home alone. And my grandfather was a very brilliant man. He had a doctorate of economics. He actually used to go guard the Pope in Rome, Italy. So
Oh,
he was a
wow.
very incredible man himself. But he died basically totally alone. And he was not the ghost haunting the house. But after he passed away, my parents moved in. And they had things like looking back that made sense. Like I said, there were some things that like were weird, but you just brush off because you don't think your house is haunted, especially when you grew up in it as a child. And when I was about 9 years old, having been in the paranormal for about a year at this time, I started feeling like I was being watched constantly. I felt like the ceiling, the walls, everything was covered with eyes. That's the only way I can describe it. And I just was really uncomfortable, but you know, you don't think your house is haunted. You just kind of brush it off. And then one day I was in my parents' bedroom and I saw a man in my mom's closet. And now I knew this wasn't an actual person standing there. I wasn't seeing him like I'm looking at you or anyone else. It's kind of like a different sight. And I told my mom and my dad, I said, there's a man in your closet. And my mom didn't know what to think. So she just said, okay. And my dad actually, even though he co-authored a book for a psychic, did not believe me. So he thought it was my imagination having been in the paranormal and him having written a book for a psychic. And one day my mom was putting on makeup in her dressing room area where the closet was, and she heard 3 knocks from the inside of her closet door. And in that moment, my parents knew that our house was in fact haunted. They grabbed a recorder, we caught EVPs, and it progressed from there. And in terms of us noticing stuff beforehand, my parents told me when they moved in, they had had the house blessed by a priest, and one of those like little chains that you lock the door with was swinging, and there was no draft. But again, you just brush it off and move on. Um, you know, their friends said after we realized it was haunted. So this ghost was focused on women, and so all my mom's female friends said that they felt uncomfortable in the home. But people don't just go, "Hey, your house freaks me out." So this was all stuff that was happening prior to us realizing, but not being noticeable until after. And one time too, actually, on New Year's Eve, my mom and dad, they were in the kitchen and I was up at my aunt's house, so I wasn't there, but a piece of metal had flown, like one of those little metal brackets that you hang blinds with. It had flown 6 feet from a shelf and hit my mom square in the back. And my dad saw it fly off, and they tried to recreate it, and they could not get the metal to actually go that far.
Oh, wow.
Um, and again, we didn't think our house was haunted. It was the first night that my grandma had gotten out after a different grandfather had passed away. And so they thought it was just my mom's dad saying, "Hey, why'd you let her go do that?" So, you know, of course you just rationalize things through the years, these little moments. But once you actually know that there's something present, in hindsight, they add up into being something that is pretty obvious. Another thing is too, I was obsessed with Charlie's Angels when I was younger. And so my dad got me an autographed photo of Drew Barrymore. And I my parents hung it up and I said, you guys have to take it down. She's staring at me. I can't, you guys have to take it down. And my parents are like, why don't you like Drew Barrymore? And looking back, because that ghost was focused on women and primarily was focused on me after I noticed his presence, I think that I was rationalizing the photo staring at me, which was actually the spirit. So
Like maybe a conduit that the spirit would kind of look through at you? Something?
I think it was the feeling of being watched, and because I was a child, my brain was telling me it's the photo making me uncomfortable rather than realizing, hey, your house is haunted, because that's not your first thought when you're actually living in a place. And so I think that in your head you rationalize it is something else in the room that's making you uncomfortable versus what the actual product of that discomfort is.
Yeah, I think like I haven't really spent nights in any haunted locations yet. It's on my bucket list, so I will get to them eventually. But I think there's something psychologically that happens if you, let's say, spend a night in an old house and
Mm-hmm.
you maybe hear those like noises that old houses would make, creaky floors, like
Yeah.
squeaky door hinges, like maybe some tree branches clattering on a window or something like that, right? And if you just stay the night there, your brain will kind of sort of rationalize all those things like I just mentioned, just like
Yeah,
just
of course.
common occurrences. But I think if I were to stay in the same situation, like a creaky house, but
Mm-hmm.
someone told me before I spent the night there that the place was haunted, I think there would be like a switch in my brain that would kind of start to think that all these occurrences are probably paranormal occurrences, not just, simple physics, I suppose I will say. So I think there's something psychologically that kind of like switches in us if we um like get the notion that a place we might be in is actually haunted, or more specifically if someone like flat out tells
Mm-hmm.
us that it's haunted.
Yeah, versus, where you aren't in the field, so you kind of rationalize away things that may be paranormal, or if you're in the situation, and I think this is a lot of things that paranormal investigators struggle with too, trying to debunk things, is making sure that it's not knowing that it's haunted, confirmation bias or self-fulfilling prophecy. Well, it's haunted, so this must be this. And so it's that fine line of not brushing something off that's paranormal, and then you never have an understanding of the field or what's going on because you kind of blow everything off as not being paranormal, but also being to the point where it's like, hey, okay, this is not paranormal either. This can be explained and is rational, and there's a rhyme and a reason for it.
So after you and your family kind of came to the conclusion that your house was haunted, how did your parents feel about you overall? Because of course, any
Mm-hmm.
good parent, and I'm not a parent myself, but any good parent, I would believe, just wants to protect their children, right? At a
Mm-hmm.
visceral level, from external threats and everything like that. But how do you protect a child from a ghost, something that you can't see but
Mm-hmm.
is there, right? So how do they kind of sort of feel about you and your safety once you all kind of came to this realization?
Well, that was definitely the hard part. Because for my dad, like I said, this ghost was focused on women. He didn't have any experiences with it. So I don't think he really grasped what I was going through. And my mom tried to be there for me as much as possible, but she was also being watched by the ghost. But like I said, because I'm telling her I am, she was trying to say, okay, well, and she didn't tell anyone this, but she was feeling like she was being watched while she slept. He was a very creepy ghost, but she was thinking, okay, well, that's not really happening. This is how I'm feeling because Sophia said it. And we had psychics come into the home and confirm that he was standing next to where she slept. And that's when she admitted that's how she had been feeling. And so there's the point where you just don't know how to handle it. Because I had these experiences really from 9 to 11 years old. And it's to the point where your home feels like a prison. You have a bad day at school, you're being bullied or something, you come home, you're being stalked. I can't watch YouTube. I can't play video games. I can't do anything. I basically clung on to my mom because she was really where I felt safe. I felt safe with her. And my dad didn't know how to handle it because this is a little kid. What's rational for her fear, and then what's a little kid that you kind of need to wean off of this. And so it was this struggle between trying to have normal parenting while also adapting to a situation that isn't normal. And really the final straw when it came to my safety actually was, so I had a loft bed and I had a couch bed in my room. And as a little kid, I thought it was fun to sleep on the couch bed. And he would pretty much go towards the back of the house. He would go down the hallway. My parents' room, my room was his primary locations he would be. And he would watch me everywhere I went. And one day my mom was cleaning the sheets on the couch bed, so I slept in my loft bed and it was up really high. Like an adult would probably hit their head if they were up there. And I would see him standing in the doorway trying to find me. And I finally felt relief, like, okay, I'm safe up here. He can't find me. I have one place I can go. And one night I was trying to sleep and he had climbed my loft bed ladder and he was this far away from me watching me. And I don't know how I fell asleep that night. And I can't even give you a time frame from when that happened to when I told my mom. But the night that the psychics were down, I said, Mom, there's something I have to tell you. And she said, not right now, sweetie. We have company over. So I grabbed her friend who was not in the paranormal, not investigator, nothing. And I told her what happened. And she grabbed my mom and said, you have to hear what Sophia said. So I told her. So now at this point, only my mother, my mom's friend, who's not an investigator, and my mom know that he had climbed my loft bed. And one of the psychics who had not heard walked past my room and said, there's a man on that loft bed ladder. And that was last night. I slept in my room. My parents had a couch in their room and I slept in there every night until we moved out. Because at
Wow.
that point, he had just gotten too close for comfort. I mean, that's this far away from you. Normally he's watching you from a doorway or, pretty far away. But when it's that close and you're that vulnerable, what do you do? How do you protect your child? And I think that's still something that we really don't have an answer for because for us, the activity and really the torment for me did not stop until we moved out.
That has to have been really tough to deal with because you're right. I mean, home is where you're supposed to feel safe, where you're
Mhm.
supposed to have a semblance of control. Again, especially if you have children that you're looking after, and of course, now dealing with things like fear from a child. Like I told you, I have my nephew
Mhm.
that I was talking to earlier, and he actually told me that sometimes he's afraid of his bedroom because he's afraid of the dark,
Mhm.
and it's just when I was growing up, if I told like a peer of mine that I was afraid of the dark, sometimes you get a lot of jokes like, "Ooh,
Yeah.
Josh is just a scaredy cat." But in the reality, darkness is a primal fear. Like all humans, I
Mhm.
think innately have a fear of the dark, or I guess I would say more specifically the unknown, because the
Mhm.
unknown we feel like we don't have any control over. And I think on a visceral level, humans we like to be in control of our lives to a good degree, right? So, would you say that maybe this whole experience really kind of like I guess took solidified you wanting to actually pursue paranormal investigating on a more to the level you are now because maybe that gave you some of that
Mhm.
control back? I'm not sure how to phrase that question, but what are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
So, well, one thing I will say too, just to add on to the story, is this spirit was actually not only affecting me and females, who were in the home, but my dog, who was a pug, actually would violently bark into the hallway. I had diamond doves in a cage in my room, and every time he would step into my room, they would violently bounce off of the cage. So when you're talking about the primal fear, I mean, even something like an animal was well, my pug, she was actually just angry. It's a pug. They're not scared of anything. But you have birds genuinely scared. I mean, you could see the fear in them. And I think that's what it comes down to as well when you're talking about me feeling like I'm being watched. It's that primal uh natural instinct that we have to know when someone's behind us, living or dead. You can tell if someone's standing behind you, you can feel that you're being watched. And that's the same when it comes to ghosts. And in terms of it making me more interested, I guess you could say it did in a way because after that experience, I wanted to know if there were other kids my age who had gone through this because I went to Catholic school. They didn't get it, which was fine. I didn't care. I still don't care. But it's not something that you have someone your age to relate to. It's not something you can go talk to your friend about. So I started my radio show really wanting to find other people like me, which I didn't, but it is what set me down that path. And in terms of me going to these haunted locations, honestly, I'm still pretty traumatized from my experience. I would definitely say I have PTSD from it. And I still deal with that to this day. And it's hard, I think, and that's one of the things I like to talk about is really the mental effect that living in a haunted house can give to you. Because when you're being stalked every day, if this was a real living person, you can try and get a restraining order or have them arrested or something. You have no power when it comes to someone doing this to you. And it's going to give you the same trauma of feeling powerless, helpless, out of control, scared. And so that's something I still deal with. And so when it comes to paranormal investigations, well, I'm already traumatized, so might as well keep doing it. And but yeah, that's really, it did launch me further into the field with just wanting to know if there were more people like me.
Gotcha. All right. So kind of getting into your actual journey as a paranormal investigator, maybe we can still look at sort of the same time frame now. But I guess before we move on to that, though, how long did you all actually end up living at that house? I'm assuming you're not there anymore, or your folks aren't.
No, we aren't. So I lived there from birth until I was 11 years old, and my parents lived there from like, I think they moved in 97 and we moved out if I was 11 in like 2010.
Okay, gotcha. All right. So, and haven't gone back, I assume.
No. I would honestly, I mean, there's tons of places I want to go, like, like insane asylums and stuff. You could not pay me enough to go back to that home.
Gotcha. All right. So we'll leave that far in the rearview mirror then for sure.
No, it's fine. I mean, people can ask me about it all day, but no one's going to get me to go back there.
Gotcha. All right. So yeah. So what I was going to ask you about your paranormal investigating journey, maybe around like the same time frame, if we could like start there. What were some of the other places that you kind of started going to, and what do you kind of remember from those experiences?
Yeah, so I did go to the Queen Mary a lot. I lived genuinely super close to the Queen Mary. So I lived by the beach. If anyone knows that song Ocean Avenue by Yellow Card, I lived on Ocean Avenue. So I was super close to the Queen Mary. And so it was really easy. You could just go there pretty much anytime, walk around. So that was like really the big thing. And my parents felt pretty safe taking me there. They actually spent the night on Alcatraz when I was like 10 years old or something. They wouldn't take me because they didn't think it was safe for a child. I argued that the Boy Scouts spent the night there. Still didn't get to go. Still haven't gone. Very upset about that. So they tried to keep me in locations that they at least felt would be safer for me to go to. I did a lot of investigations with psychics. So in terms of locations, it was limited to what was deemed appropriate. I did like an undisclosed warehouse that was haunted. I went to, when I was a little bit older, when I was 12, La Prisma Mission, which they would have let me go to when I was younger, but that's just when I went. I went to, let me think, Cal State Long Beach. They have a Native American burial ground there. So I went to places like that were deemed a little bit more appropriate rather than like, okay, here's a prison, here's a mental asylum. So when I was that young, it was a lot of the Queen Mary, just due to the fact it was safer.
Well, and of course, like we mentioned, it's one of the most haunted locations, if not the most haunted location in the entire world. But that's wild, though. I mean, to be an paranormal investigator and just having like the most haunted location in the world, just right up the road from you.
Yeah, so I mean, you can see why I went there a lot too. So when I got to high school, some of the kids I said that didn't understand me paranormal investigating in Catholic school, when I went to public high school, we did a field trip to the Queen Mary for art class for the Art Deco section. That's how close I was. And they had like a scavenger hunt, and the girls from my Catholic school were like, come join our group. So it's one of those things when you have the most haunted location, you kind of get pulled into it just either way. School takes you, you go. It's just like
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So like, what kind of occurrences that did you experience on the Queen Mary? Because when I looked up the history of the ship, my goodness, like so much pain,
mhm.
death, anguish in like that confined vessel. I mean, it's a huge vessel, but within that
Yes.
that vessel. So, has anything like happened? Have you ever maybe by chance like got like hurt at all on aboard this vessel? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I mean I am accident prone. I don't recall hurting myself ever, but yeah, I mean I was touched by a ghost on my elbow once when I was younger. I mean we've heard voices. I mean the engine room's my favorite place to go. I know that pool is super active and very revered, and it should be. It is very active. But the engine room, you can literally go in there and hear someone audibly just out loud speaking. You can't make out what they're saying, but you can hear someone talking. If you go to the propeller box, it gives you a very unnerving, uneasy feeling. And you can hear someone whistling from the exhibits down there, and there's no one around. So, I mean, you have tons of occurrences like that. I investigated there with Ghost Adventures, and we caught some really clear, crazy EVPs. I mean, talk about cursing. That ghost knew a lot. It was, I don't even remember if it made the episode because you would literally have to bleep out an EVP, which is insane. But in terms of things that I've seen there, on my very first investigation, we were eating at Sir Winston's. It was a dinner and ghost tour. And I saw this face in the window, and there was like a fabric background. So I kept looking at it, and then I would look at the window because I'm like, is this the reflecting of the fabric? And Peter believed that I was seeing actually the ghost of Captain Treasure Jones, I believe, who passed away on the ship. And so that was really my first sighting, I would say, that I remember. And then continuing on in the paranormal, I started seeing a shadow man in the pool area, and I just call him the shadow man. But he's probably the one in the EVP. He's not very nice. He doesn't like me. I don't like him. So we have that in common, which is really cool. That's about it. And the night I investigated with Ghost Adventures, I wanted to tell them. So the pool area, if you've been in there, it always has low lighting for safety reasons and everything. And when you're with Ghost Adventures, they got it pitch black, dark. And it's the very first time in all my years investigating. And like I said, I went there when I was 8 for my first tour. I investigated with them at 15 on my last day of freshman year. And it was pitch black. I'd never seen it like that. And it genuinely felt like the Shadow Man got more energy and more intense in the dark. And I could see him, which I know sounds weird because it was dark, but I could see him in multiple places at once. And I wanted to tell them, hey, the Shadow Man's here. And every time I wanted to talk about him, I felt like I was going to cry. So it felt like he really had a hold on me in that moment. And they had doors open. It was probably the most active I've ever seen the pool area in my life. And I have gone there probably hundreds of times. It was genuinely such a crazy investigation. So that one really stands out to me. Besides just, the engine room and the whistling, was the fact of how intense and just overwhelming it felt in there, just having the lights out.
Yeah, hearing actual voices and collecting EVPs aside, just like you said, the feeling that you described just going in there. And I had a similar feeling like that, actually. I didn't tell you this when you and I were connecting, but I'm an archaeologist by day.
Mhm.
And I did some field work at Andersonville, Georgia, which back in the Civil War, Andersonville was the site of a pretty notorious, POW camp. And like, so it was like an open air prison too. So you had so many captured soldiers that were suffering from exposure,
Mhm.
diseases, starvation. It was like hell on earth, and it was in a relatively small space. Like, you could easily look from like one side to the other and walk across it like within a minute or so. And when I walked the grounds, the best I could just describe, Sophia, is that it just felt so heavy. again, just
Yeah.
like the amount of suffering and anguish and death that occurred in just that one spot, it just felt so heavy. And like, I mean, I almost felt like my knees were going to buckle a little bit. And so it's kind of just crazy when you know you have so much negative energy in one place and just, you know, how that makes you feel the moment you step into it.
Absolutely. I mean, that type of energy really does leave an effect. And I would say in the paranormal, there's typically like two types of classifications, or at least beliefs of energy. There's intelligent hauntings and there's residual hauntings. And residual hauntings really are basically an energy imprint on the location or land or whatever it is. If you take Gettysburg, you know, people hear or see soldiers still fighting, and that's usually believed to be an imprint of that historical moment, or someone walking the same route every day in their house and their ghost still does that. It may not be their ghost, but it's kind of an imprint of what they left behind energy wise. So I definitely can see why that location would have that as well, because those types of occurrences really do leave a lasting impact long after the war is over.
So would you say Aboard the Queen Mary, there was probably maybe like a combination of the two? I mean, obviously the intellectual hauntings will clearly be the voices and the EVPs that you collected.
Mhm.
And then, but you, was there also like some instances of residual hauntings as well that you might have observed on the ship?
Yeah, I mean, since I've heard the whistling multiple times, I would say that that could technically, I mean, it's hard to classify them just based on the fact that you don't know if it's an intelligent haunting making the whistling sound or not. But you could, since it's repetitive, probably deduce that it may be a residual haunting. You know, the soldiers walking back and forth, whistling and leaving that imprint. So I think that's kind of one of the harder things to determine is what's, I guess, seeing a pattern and seeing if it's repetitive certain times and this being able to say more definitively if it's residual. But any location that's haunted probably does have a combination of some type of residual and intelligent haunting. Whether it's from the same ghost or not, too, I guess could be a question. And you could have the intelligent spirit there, but also whatever imprint they left from their time at that place.
Now, have you ever done any paranormal investigations by yourself, or is solo investigating kind of like a no-no amongst paranormal investigators?
Generally people do believe that you should investigate with someone accompanying you. Not only just, you know, for validation, knowing like, hey, I saw this, you did too, or oh, hey, you saw that, but I saw it from this angle and it was a car headlight. So it's helpful in that sense that they can help you debunk things. Also, if you're looking at locations such as like an abandoned insane asylum, there are real physical dangers in the field. Not just haunting dangers, you know, you have rusted nails, you have people that could be living in the location when they're not supposed to be. So it's generally safer to not go alone just for tons of reasons, largely actual physical reasons. So I haven't investigated solo. Um, and I think it's just more fun to be with someone, you know, have someone to kind of bounce off of, ask questions, because a lot of investigating is sitting alone in the dark, asking questions, hearing nothing, and then capturing something upon review. So if you were investigating alone, it would be a lot of talking to yourself and getting no response.
Well, not to mention, you know, you'll have to bear the labor of what a crew could potentially do. Because, you know, when I see like
Yeah.
different crews out there, you know, you got some people who are specialists, like with like either EVP
Yes.
or, you know, running tech or running the camera or whatever the case may be. But then I think if you got to handle all of that on top of, like you said, trying to manage and
Yeah.
mitigate safety and hazards, then that's a lot of work. I don't know how much you would enjoy actually investigating if you have to do all that grunt work too.
And some people do. Some people prefer to investigate solo. I'm more of like a, I want to go do something with someone. Plus, I'm not an octopus. If you want to use like different things, you have to set it on the ground and hope you don't kick it or something like that. If you want to move around and get readings, it's a little bit easier when you have multiple people that can take different devices and kind of move around at the same time. Or like I said, if you're doing like, say, an SD session, someone has to be under that's
And I'm
basically
sorry, Sophia. What's an SD session?
yeah, sorry. So an SD session is, I don't know if you've seen Stranger Things, but you know when
Mhm.
11 goes under, and basically total blindness, deafness. It's similar to that. So an SC's session is you have headphones that are noise canceling, and it is plugged into, say, like an SP7 spirit box, which cycles through radio frequencies at a high rate, and then words kind of jump out. So you have noise canceling headphones that you can hear words in through the spirit box. Then you have a blindfold on so you can't see anything. So it's sort of sensory deprivation. And the person under is sitting there shouting out the words that they hear. And the person who is not under is asking questions. So basically the experiment is the person cannot hear or know what is being asked, but they're telling you words that may be the spirit answering the question that was asked.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'd want to be the one with the headphones and the blindfold because it's just, I'm just wondering if something very, very loud and spooky is going to come through those earbuds at any second.
Yeah, that's not really my thing. I'm not great at being the one under. I think just living in a haunted house, I overthink it too much, and then I'm not like as present in the experiment. So I've done it on both ends. I've done it twice. I was the one under, didn't get anything, and then I was the one asking questions, and that went really well. So yeah, I'm definitely not the blindfolded person on that one.
Now, have you dabbled into investigating any cryptids by chance, or is that kind of sort of outside of your wheelhouse a little?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not opposed to doing anything in the field like that. I haven't personally done it. I know some people have told me I need to go to I think it's Pleasantville, Virginia.
Point Pleasant, West Virginia?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with the Mothman. So I've been told that a lot recently. Personally, I think my dad is Bigfoot, so I guess you could say that that's investigating a cryptid when I talk to him. But yeah, I haven't done that yet, but I mean, I'm only 25, so even though I've mainly been focused on ghosts, I feel like I have a lot of time to really like explore other areas of it and kind of see what's out there. Because starting so young, even though I've been doing this a really long time, I don't have a lot of the investigations as like an older person who's been doing it 17 years because I'm juggling school, normal kid things along with investigating. So I haven't had the travel experience that some people have. I'm on the West Coast and I've never investigated past Arizona.
So, you know, if for cryptids, I may have to encourage you to come to my home state, Michigan. I actually may have had a cryptid, not encounter, but proximity to me at some point. So a few years ago, I walked across the entire state of Michigan. I through hiked it, and I spent the night in Wexford County, Michigan, which is kind of in the northern part of it. Now, Wexford County, back in like the late 19th century, was where some of the first sightings of Michigan's dogman, which is supposedly a bipedal creature, a werewolf, effectively, I guess is the best way I could describe it. And so I pitched my tent on top of, this plateau. There's a river valley down below me, and I just pitched my tent there because I wanted to have a nice view in the morning, of the valley. And down in the valley, I swear I heard a wolf howling, and followed by what sounded like the yelping of a bunch of coyotes. And I thought maybe at first, those were those coyotes actually wolves, and now they're yelping. Like what's going on here? And some of the trail angels, which were people that I stayed with when I was hiking, they said, "Josh, we don't have any wolves like in this part of Michigan, like at all." I'm like, I heard a wolf. I swear I heard a wolf. So I'm thinking to myself, this is Wexford County. I just heard a wolf. Did I just hear the dog man harassing a pack of coyotes? So at that point, I was glad I was like high up on this plateau while this was all happening down in the valley below me. So,
yeah, I mean, I feel like it's so fascinating. Just, you meet so many people that have stories, whether it's cryptid, UFOs, ghosts. I mean, someone usually has a story surrounding something in the supernatural. And I think there's so many aspects that have yet to be explored by myself personally and just in general. My wheelhouse is ghosts just based on my background and experiences, but I'm always open to learning more about the field and the paranormal. I know I've met through the years some cryptozoology people in the field, and it's just really interesting to get to hear their stories and learn about these different creatures that you only see in fictional shows or video games, like the Wendigos in Until Dawn. But, there's all these backstories and histories of where their origins might have been and where people may have cited them.
Yeah, and it's also interesting looking back on like the human past too, like different cultures in different parts of the world that had never met before, but then like they all have some sort of like version of like a mythical creature or an entity that's effectively the same. Like so many cultures out there have their own interpretation of vampires
Yeah.
or lycanthropes or something along those lines too. So it's one of those things that sometimes I just can't help but ask myself, can it fully be chalked up to myth if all these different people who never interacted effectively all believed kind of the same thing? So it's really kind of hard to say.
Yeah, and I mean, I've always heard that any like folklore or story passed down always has some root in truth, whether it was a story meant to represent something or something. There's always some truth to it. And like you said, it really does span different cultures. I was just talking about this on my show this past weekend. You have the banshees who are talked about in Ireland. You have Dia de los Muertos celebrating, the loved ones who have passed on. And all these cultures really do have kind of the same baseline of believing in an afterlife. Whether that's, a scary story of a banshee or honoring your family. There's so many cultures that share similar things, even if they are different.
Yeah, so it kind of makes me wonder, like, what else is out there too. And, I think this is just goes back to just another basic thing that that's innate in all humans, and that is just curiosity too. I think there's just we just want to know more about like the world itself. And that's why I think a lot of like the shows like Ghost Adventures are so popular nowadays. It's just because, they really do tap into that curiosity where it's just like, we want to know more. And again, especially it's just, for anyone out there who will have maybe occurrences in their lives that they really can't, explain or find any sort of reason to. So I think, just that search, that quest for answers, I think, drives a lot of people.
Absolutely. And I think that's the thing. I was talking about this on my show this past weekend. A lot of people, have a hard time with paranormal YouTubers because with CGI and stuff, it's hard to know what's real or fake. It's hard to dispute it. And that's why I would never try and convince someone the paranormal is real or argue with them or tell them they're wrong, because it's a very hard field to believe in unless you have experiences yourself or unless you have that desire to want those experiences. It's really hard to wrap your head around. But I think when you have it in media the way it is, whether it's scripted shows or fake, it does bring out that interest in people. And the field has become so much less taboo from when I started in 2007 until today. I mean, back then you had ghost hunters, and Paranormal State, but the shows were very few and far between, and there was a huge interest, and that's why it's still continuing to this day. But those were really the first kind of wave of shows, besides, shows like Sightings, where they just talked about things that people saw. Having something that was solely based in ghosts was really, I think, kind of new. And now you have people on social media going and sharing their stories on TikTok, or YouTubers going out and seeking out haunted locations to investigate. And I think it really broadens people's minds and helps them find different formats, a way to take information in a way that's interesting for them. And I think that's kind of what it comes down to, is finding what way information is presented that makes it fun for you to take that information.
Right. I think it's just like presenting evidence and then kind of let people like deciding for themselves, like, if this evidence to them is enough to convince them that, yes, like ghosts are real, or there's not enough there to get them to believe so. So a few years ago, well, I say a few, but this is like, it was a little bit longer than that. I was teaching a class of fourth graders. And we were doing a session called Curiosity Wednesday, where I asked like the students to pose like just some questions to me, just general things that they might be curious about, and I'll
Hmm.
try to answer them as best I can. And one of the questions that I got was, is Bigfoot real? And then, of course, I couldn't just like outright, tell them, yes, Bigfoot is real. I mean, well, it's like I didn't have any like proof to show them, but I brought up that old oh, the name of the man who filmed it eludes me, but it was back in like the late 60s.
Hmm.
Of like the Bigfoot, I think it was in Northern California, just striding along like this dry
Yeah.
riverbed. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yes.
Okay, why can't I think of the name of the guys who filmed it? But anyway, so I played that, like I found it on YouTube or something like that, and I played that. I'm like, well, this is supposedly footage that was captured of Bigfoot, and it's one of the most compelling pieces of evidence that's out there right now on the existence of Bigfoot. So let me play it for you all. And then I'm like, well, there's some evidence, but it's up to you all. What do you all think?
Hmm.
Like, is this enough to convince you or not? So I think really that's maybe what it boils down to, is just like, presenting evidence. I mean, in your case with your radio show, and then with, people having like their shows on Travel Channel or wherever else. So yeah, just getting the information out there.
Yeah, and it's really like anything else. It's finding what makes sense for you as an individual, whether it's going out and seeking that information for yourself, seeing it firsthand, or it's hearing the stories from someone you trust enough in your life, or maybe it is just watching a TV show and having enough faith in who's presenting it to you on TV. I think it's kind of like when you're in school and history is presented to you, maybe it's boring, maybe it's not as fun, but if you watch, say, drunk history, and the way they're presenting it is a little bit more palatable, and it's really finding what makes sense for you, because as individuals, no one person's like, no one's experiences are the same, and each person's going to have different beliefs and thoughts, and it's really an individual journey, whether it's self-discovery that leads you to the paranormal, or some people just don't, and that's fine too, because who is to say that, someone's wrong when it comes to their thoughts? I can't make someone believe something if they don't want to, and they can't make me believe otherwise. And it's just one of those things where it's just each individual searching through life, trying to figure out what makes sense.
Right. So now you said you don't really do horror movies a whole lot, but have you found any horror movies out there that maybe depict paranormal investigation that may be like some pretty accurate to as what paranormal investigating's really like, or is it, or is like most of the movies would like that just be too Hollywoodized, for lack of better terms?
I mean, I haven't watched like Paranormal Activity or anything, so I'm not sure. I mean, I guess if you want to go like say The Conjuring, because it's based in a real story, but I've interviewed the daughter from the Conjuring house, Andrea Perron, and she said, a lot of it was fictionalized, that the clapping game never happened, wasn't real. So I guess if you're going in terms of stories, you have ones that were rooted in real stories. And I think, like I said, it broadens people's ideas. Hey, what is true and what isn't from movies? I'm trying to think of TV shows too. I mean, it's just kind of hard because everything takes creative liberty, because, you have to make it interesting for the viewer.
Right.
I'm drawing a blank right now, but I would say, even though I haven't seen The Conjuring, that's just what I know from interviewing Andrea is, there were definitely creative liberties taken, but Ed and Lorraine were real people. The Perrons were real people. The farmhouse is real. It still exists. It's still haunted. And so I would say possibly that is maybe the most accurate, just based on the fact that it is real events that occurred with real people's names and stories.
Do you have a favorite scary movie?
I mean, I saw, so like I said, I'm trying to start watching them. I watched a show called Legacies, and they had like a one with, it was a slasher episode, and I saw a guy get killed in a sleeping bag, and my dad told me that happened in Friday the 13th. So like I want to watch Friday the 13th. I have not yet. I saw Scream 5 and 6. I did like Scream 6. I still need to watch the other ones, but I don't want to watch it with commercials, so I'm trying to find it on one of the streaming services I have. But I did like Scream 6. I really like Ghostface. I think he's super cool looking, and I just love his like whole thing.
Yeah, I would have to say out of the slashers, the one that scared me the most growing up was probably Michael Myers from the Halloween franchise. So,
Oh, yeah, I did
mhm.
see that. I did see Halloween, but I had a lot of complaints about Laurie Strode because why would you set the needles down? You didn't even like verify that he was dead. Like, why did you not confirm a kill or something? I don't know, maybe because I'm a gamer or something, kill confirmed, but she didn't confirm the kill. She hid in like the world's flimsiest closet. Loomis completely useless. This guy can't be taken down, so you're walking around with a revolver. You get 6 shots. He did nothing. So I just had a lot of like, why? But he drove really well too. It's like, didn't you go in when you were like 10?
Yeah, that movie fascinates me in some ways. Like I had learned that it was actually like one of like the highest grossing like independent films of
Mm-hmm.
all time. Like I guess apparently it had like a budget of like I think 300,000, but then it grossed like several million or something like that. So that part particularly fascinates me. And then of course, it set a franchise, that like segued into like so many other different
Mm-hmm.
films, like even now, like 40 plus years later. But I think it was just like the thing about Michael Myers is just, he was just that silent killer, hiding behind the mask
Mm-hmm.
and then such an imposing and unstoppable force too. It's just like you said, I mean, the guy got shot and fell from like, a 2-story balcony and then just got right up and walked away. So it's just like, so I think that kind of like scared me a little bit until later on when I learned that they actually modeled that mask after William Shatner's
Yeah.
face. And so I'm like,
Heard
okay,
about
all
that.
right, that's good now.
That was so random because it's just like who looks at the Star Trek mask and goes, that that's our Michael. So I thought that was really funny. But I mean, the one that really got me when I was younger that I saw is I watched Cheapers Creepers 1 and 2, and they didn't actually scare me when I watched them, but afterwards I like was having nightmares. Oh, you know what one I hated? Leprechaun. It's not the Leprechaun movies. My mom put on Leprechauns in the Hood, and I didn't like the zombie girls in it. So I was not a fan of Leprechaun, and then I just like had dreams afterwards that I was fighting the Leprechaun from Leprechaun. So that was, yeah, it was weird. I don't even know. But I love horror games. I think it's more just like that I'm in control of this situation thing. So I love horror games.
Yeah, speaking of nightmares, there was only like one thing that's actually like perpetuated like into my dreams that I actually still remember pretty vividly to
Hmm.
this day. And you're gonna laugh, but it was Michael Jackson's Thriller music video.
Yeah.
Like I actually had a dream that a horde of zombies like actually trapped me in my upstairs bedroom. And then I jumped out the window because I, wanted to get away from them. I saw no other means to escape. And then I woke up and I was kind of sort of in like that sleeping awake state. You're kind of like sort of
Hmm.
like on the cusp of falling asleep, but you're like half awake, I suppose. And it felt like someone was like holding me like in their arms like
Hmm.
this. And I was afraid that if I opened my eyes, I could be looking at one of those zombies that caught me when I jumped out the window or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's like, and then I was awake and I was back in my room. So all was well. But yeah, so that was the only thing that's actually infiltrated my dreams to that extent to when I remember it, though.
Yeah, I don't know. I had like really crazy dreams when I was younger. Like, I don't know, Rob Zombie's Living Dead Girl for some reason like gave me nightmares when I was younger. And so I like still can't listen to that song just because I don't know why he like the I don't know. It was just really strange. So I had lots of really scary dreams when I was younger, really scary to me. And I know that's kind of like one of the symptoms, I guess, sometimes of living in a haunted house. So I just think that's probably correlated. So I think that's part of the reason I don't watch horror movies either, is because you don't have control. And then like I already got scared for like living in a haunted house. So why would I do that to myself? I think Ghostface, he's so the reason I actually watched Scream is because I was on TikTok and I saw a compilation of like Courtney Cox just getting punched a lot. And I was like, I thought people liked Gail Weathers and I didn't realize how she was. And I just thought it was funny. So I was like, oh, I'm gonna watch this still.
Yeah, when I watched Scream, like the original one, like back in like 1960s, I was about to say 1966, 1996. It like really kind of turned the genre like on its head, like the
Hmm.
slasher genre on its head, because this one was utilizing like technology. This killer was using technology and terrorizing people like ahead of time, like more or less playing with his food, if you will,
Hmm.
and it could have been anyone. And there was like so many characters that you followed throughout the movie that you couldn't help but think, is he the killer? Is she the
Hmm.
killer? It's just, it was one of those things that you just, there was so much mystery like involved too, where like most other like slasher movies were a little bit more straightforward than that. So yeah, something about Scream in the thrasher and horror genre, it stands out in my opinion.
I heard it was based on real murders too. I never looked into that, but that's what I heard at least. And I know that when they were marketing it, as far as I'm aware, they were marketing it heavily with Drew Barrymore being featured, so that you thought she was the main girl, you thought she was the final girl, and then just to flip the script and kill her in the very opening sequence.
Yeah, she's on the cover for the movie, or the poster for the movie. I do
Yeah.
remember that. So now here's kind of a fun question, since we're kind of in this horror
Hmm.
space right now. I think a lot of horror fans like to pose these questions to each other, and that is, would you rather be a vampire or a werewolf?
Oh my gosh. Well, that's so, it just really depends on what version we're talking about. I mean, if it's like a
Very
Twilight
true.
vampire, I don't think I would want to be one. Like, first off, I don't want to shine in the sunlight, and they just seem like a little overly broody, but also Jacob Black imprinting on a baby is really weird. So I don't know if I want to be one of their werewolves either. But then if we're talking about the Vampire Diaries, I mean, you have Klaus Michelson, the original vampire, and who can compel other vampires. You have, the vampires whose blood heals people and is able to help. I would rather be those vampires, the Vampire Diaries ones, because the werewolves there are genuinely bound to the moonlight and they have to transform once a month. So, but then Teen Wolf, they can change on command and they seem to just kind of chill. So I think it kind of varies based on what depiction of each species you're talking about. But generally, I would rather be a vampire.
Gotcha. Yeah, yeah, that's a really good point, because yeah, so many different franchises and universe has their own interpretations. Now I certainly wouldn't want to be a werewolf if it's like I change into like an actual wolf, like a full wolf
Hmm.
form. I want to change into like the bipedal, tall, powerful wolf-faced creature that most people think of when they think of werewolves. I suppose I'll say. Now for vampires though, I guess I will probably say, I think probably one of the better depictions of vampires in pop culture, in my opinion, would probably have to be the True Blood vampires. I would say,
Hmm.
like being like affected by the sun. But then of course there was like some of the vampire tropes didn't quite make it in that show, like crosses and holy water and all that stuff. I think it was mostly
Hmm.
just the sun and the stake through the heart were like the main things that killed the vampires in that show. But um, so yeah, I guess it's hard to say, but I think
Because
overall, yeah, I mean, we could really take this could be a podcast in and of itself, where we're breaking down mythical creatures in pop culture. But
Buffy the Vampire Slayer, I would have to say absolutely no way. Don't want to be a vampire. They like have the demon take over them, and they're not even themselves anymore. And the whole angel debacle. So if it was like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, like no way, because you're not even yourself at that point. You're just something else.
gotcha. Okay, so but yeah, I think maybe overall though, I think maybe. Gosh, it's now that we're talking about this, it's a toss up. I mean, I was about to say vampire too, but man, a werewolf's got some power. And then I think like if it's like how most werewolf movies go, where if the person is in their human form, they still got some of their werewolf abilities, like their
Hmm.
strength, their heightened sentences, and all that sort of stuff. So I think if it was like that, I think I'd probably go werewolf. I would say, but and also having the ability to change at will and not be controlled by the full moon. So
But then again, if you're going on depictions, if you go Vampire Diaries, the werewolves can be turned into vampire werewolf hybrids. So
that
then you
that,
get the
that is
best of
true.
both worlds because the vampires, I mean, they can be killed in a ton of different ways, but their blood heals people. They can have daylight rings, but if you're a werewolf, you're super bound to the once a month transformation, and it's extremely painful. But if you're hybrid, you can transform at any point in time. You do not have to transform if you want to. Plus, you have the perks of not burning in the sun. You still have enhanced hearing. You run really fast. So it's definitely, I think, down to who the writer is in that case.
Yeah, I would have to say, yeah, the Vampire Diaries series certainly I think was like the most complex with their. I mean, it was a very original depiction of vampires and werewolf, but it was also kind of complex. It's just like try to follow it, and then eventually, there was the vampire werewolf hybrids, and then there was the tribrid later on
The
too.
tribrid, yes.
And I'm like, but what I liked about it was just the idea of like magic and like nature. I mean, of course, like vampires had their ability, but like the witches made them, slaves to the sun, and then the werewolf slaves to the moon. So I kind of like how they sort of set that up, and just how all that went. So I really like how they presented vampires and werewolves in that show. It was very original, but also
literally
confusing at the same time too, I'd say.
Yeah, they had a lot of things and a lot of loopholes. You had the Gemini witches, which were siphoners, but they couldn't produce their own magic. They had to siphon it off of something else. Then you had in Legacy's Triad, which was because of Malavar, this mud man. So I mean, when you got to the third series, that's when they really started introducing like a ton of different things, and then you could have like a ton of lore just all over the place. But I think depiction wise, if you're gonna choose like a vampire, they probably have the most solid normal ones to go off of. Unless you're talking about Ripper Stefan, or Klaus's just thought process, which is not there half the time. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I also like how they wove in the hunters into that show as well. And, the hunters, human, but practically having the strength of a vampire, and then couldn't be compelled or put under any sort of control. And then also like the curse that they inflicted, where like, a lot of vampires were reluctant to kill a hunter because they knew that the curse would follow them for the rest of their their eternal existence. So a lot of cool stuff in that show. I will say for sure.
Well, I also heard that actually during the originals, I'm pretty sure it was the originals, though I know the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina also used real spells from what I was told. So during the filming of the originals, I guess season 1 or season 2, one of the writers, someone got a hold of the writer's room phone number and told them stop using actual spells because you don't know the repercussions. So during the original seasons of that show, the witches were using spells that they found by witches in this life, whether you believe in that or not. But they were trying to root it is in reality as they could when it came to the witches and the covens and the earth magic and all of that when it came to the New Orleans witches.
So they actually probably maybe found some grimoires during their research and actually like extracted spells from them. Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's what I was told. And then on the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, I heard that someone working on the show actually was a witch in their spare time. They were just a film person though on there. So she was giving them spells to use and then saying, oh no, this is fine to use. So I know as far as I've heard, those two shows had actual connections to at least the magic world. And after the writers' room got that call, they just started making stuff up. But at least in terms of the originals, they did do that in the first season.
Oh, that's cool. Oh, I didn't know that. Nice. All right. So what do you have on the horizon, like coming up? Maybe we can just look at maybe the remainder of this year, I suppose. I mean, you've had a busy year already with hosting your show. You also had a couple of magazine features that you were in as well. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about like how your year has been and, maybe what you got on the horizon?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm working on a project right now that hopefully I'll be able to put out at some point. I'm still in the production stages, so I'm hoping to make some really cool paranormal content later this year. But I've been doing my radio show. I celebrated 13 years this year. It's called The Ghost Host on liveparanormal.com. It's every Saturday from 12 to 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 8 p.m. GMT. You can listen to archive shows on iHeartRadio. Some of them are filmed and put onto YouTube, Blog Talk Radio, Spreaker, iTunes podcasts, all of that sort of stuff. I was featured, like you said, in Ghosted Magazine, which is a really incredible paranormal magazine. I was in their 3rd issue, I believe, which was their Penhurst issue. So that was super cool. So my story's in there. I was also featured in a book by a group of amazing women in the field called Women on the Fringe, Groundbreaking Women in the Paranormal. So my story of living in a childhood home that was haunted, starting my radio show, is all featured in that book alongside stories of other incredible women in the paranormal. I will also be at OC Paracon this October on a panel discussing the paranormal and everything that comes with that. So that will be October 12th. Of course, I have more radio shows upcoming, and yeah, so that's so far this year. I've done a ton of interviews that I posted on social media and stuff. Yeah, so more interviews, and hoping to make a really cool thing for everyone to see paranormal wise.
Outstanding. So where can our listeners and viewers go to connect with you? So like social media handles and things along those lines.
Yeah, so you guys can go on Twitter. You can follow updates on the show at Ghost Host Show. My personal Twitter is at Sophia Temperilli with 1 L because my name's too long. Instagram at Sophia Temperilli, even though I don't go on there that much. And Facebook, Sophia Temperilli. You can like the Ghost Host Show on Facebook, YouTube, the Ghost Host Sophia Temperilli. Like I said, you can listen to archive shows there. You can also listen on Blog Talk Radio weekly. You can go there and listen to the show every Saturday with upcoming guests that we have. And this weekend, my guest is, well, this is pre-recorded, but my upcoming guest is Zach Wenzel. So you guys can go check out that archive show if it's later or if it's before, go catch it this weekend. And then we just had on Patty Negri from Ghost Adventures, and we have a ton of great guests. It's a lot. I've been working on a lot of stuff, so it's hard to remember it all. But yeah, thank you again for having me a part of this and getting to talk about my stories.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. And I'll be getting all those linked up in the show notes for this episode, or if we have viewers who are watching us talk on YouTube, they can find it in the description below. So it'll be nice and convenient to go click away and find everything. So all right. Well, Sophia, as we start winding down here, I just have a few more standard questions that I ask all my guests at the end of the show. And one of the things I like to ask my guests to do is to issue a challenge to our listeners, because we got to hear some really cool stories from you today. And we also got to get a lot of information from you today. But I always say that information and stories can only take our listeners and viewers so far. They have to go out and follow up with action when they're done listening to this episode. So with that, what challenge would you issue to our listeners today for them to go out there and start living a more adventurous life?
I would say if you find something interesting, whether it's like on a scripted show, I was just watching, oh my gosh, it's the haunting of, oh my God, Mike Flanagan's show on Netflix. I can't think of the title right now, but the writer in the series was writing books on actual haunted locations. So if you see something in a show that you think is interesting and may not be true, look it up and maybe go there, check it out and research the location, because from what I've found, there's so much that seems fake and it's real life. And I think just being able to explore that more and learn more just about things that you may never have heard of can really lead you down a path you never expected.
Absolutely. All right. So next, what I have for you is my final three. Again, these are three, I like to think that they're fun questions that I ask all my guests at the end of the show. So of course, you're going to get asked these as well. And the first of these three questions is, what is your favorite place that you've been to so far?
I would say probably the Glen Tavern Inn, just based on the fact I had such a crazy paranormal experience there. And it's so out of place in Santa Paula, California, that it's just one of those places you don't see every day. And that's really what I'm drawn to is, living in the city. I love going to places that are not something you can just walk to your corner and see. So that's kind of my favorite place is the Glen Tavern Inn, and just getting to see new places that I don't see every day.
Well, that is definitely a first answer to this question, and so we are 1 for 1 for original answers to these questions. But I got a couple more for you, and the second one is: what is one thing on your bucket list that you have yet to do?
Oh my gosh, well, there's so much I've had yet to do. I would say really just, the project I'm working on right now. If I'm able to get that out and share that with people, that's one thing on my bucket list that is a dream for me. It's a location that I really, since I found out about it existing, is everything I could ever want in a location, history wise and location wise. So bucket list, it's, what I'm currently working on and hoping I get to share that with everyone watching.
Okay. Could you tell us where it is, or is it a surprise?
It's a surprise. I wish I could say more. I'm still in the process. I know I hate when people do that, but like I mean bucket list wise, like my dream is just literally to make this. So my bucket list is literally right now just this.
All right. Very, very good. All right. And the last of these three questions. And oh, by the way, that's another first, of course. So we are 2 for 2 for original answers to these final three. But the third and final question, and this is a two-parter: what is your favorite animal, and have you seen this animal in the wild?
Oh my gosh. I love sloths. I think they're pretty great. So I haven't seen one in the wild. Other than that, maybe my dog Maya. If I take her outside, I see her in the wild. I think she's great. But I do also want to say bucket list. I would really love to go to, since I'll give people actual locations that aren't cryptic. I would love to go to Poveglia Island in Italy. And I would love to go to like Tokyo, Japan. Not paranormal wise. I just really want to go there. And Alcatraz, since my parents went and left me at home.
All right. Yes. Let's see. Now, that particular island in Italy, definitely a first. Has anyone said Tokyo, Japan? I don't think so. And no one certainly says Alcatraz Island. So we got a lot of firsts for this episode, Sophia, and
I don't.
also sloths too. I feel like I would remember if one of my guests said sloths. So I think we think you just like clean the board with original answers here.
I don't think anyone's ever said my dog Maya either. So it's probably a first.
Certainly
I
not.
love chameleons too, but I've never seen one in the wild. I had a chameleon. They're pretty cool.
Yeah, I did get to hold a chameleon before. I used to live in West Africa, and there was quite a
Oh
few of
wow.
them there. So yeah, it's just I got a couple of photos of me like with making a bridge with my hands and just letting the chameleon like walk across. So they're pretty cool for sure. So
Yeah.
all right, well, Sophia, that's it. That's all the questions that I have for you tonight. But before, again, we call it a day here, can we just recap one more time where our listeners can go and connect with you, and where they can tune into the Ghost Host?
For sure. Like I said, you can listen to Ghost Hosts on liveparanormal.com every Saturday, 12 to 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard, 8 p.m. GMT. You can listen to it archived on Blog Talk Radio, iTunes Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spreaker. You can also listen to it live every Saturday. I'm on Twitter at Sophia Temperilli, Instagram at Sophia Temperilli. You can look up the Ghost Host Show on Twitter. Follow us on Facebook, YouTube, basically everything. And yeah, there's a link tree I think will be linked down below. So everything will be there.
Yep. And like I said, I'll get it all linked up in the show notes down below. Or again, if we have viewers that are watching us talk on YouTube, it's down in the description. They can find it there. All right. Well, Sophia, I want to thank you very much for taking the time for joining me today. And again, helping me reach this milestone episode with the All Around Adventure podcast, first paranormal investigator to join me. But yeah, it was really great to have you on, and I had a lot of fun, hearing your stories and chatting about all things spooky with you tonight. This has been great.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. It's an honor to be your first paranormal guest or someone in the spooky realm. And yeah, I'm excited to kind of fill that spooky season need on your show. So thank you again for asking me. I really do appreciate it.
That's my pleasure. Right on.